In the previous movie, we looked at hyphenation. In our quest for a good type color or even type density, especially if we are using justified text, we need to combine hyphenation with justification. And we also need to give ourselves a fighting chance. We need to make sure that there are enough characters on every line so that the justification can take place without being intrusive and without introducing big spaces between the words. This is referred to as the column measure. How many characters do we have per line? There's no definitive right number. It is going to depend upon the nature of the text that you are working with. But the more you have, the easier it's going to be in order to achieve good justification. There does become a point beyond which you don't want to extend the length of the line because that will compromise the readability. So in this particular case, I would suggest that this middle example with 50 to 60 characters per line is going to be the better solution. If we take a look at the next page, I have highlighted the word spaces, and hopefully we can see that they are a lot more even here than they are in the first example. They may be more even in the third example, but in that example, the line length is too long. So the compromise, I think, is this line. Let me go back to the first page where we don't see that highlighting. So how do we determine how many characters there are per line? Well, we could just count them, or we could use the info panel. This is where the info panel comes into its own. We can select a line by clicking on it 3 times, and it will tell us how many characters we have per line. So I'm aiming, and this is a ballpark figure that people often aim for, between 50 and 60 characters per line. So when that criteria has been met, let's now introduce some hyphenation and justification to see how we can improve the type color of the column on the right hand side, and we'll use the one on the left as our control. Now when I press the W key, I go to my normal view mode. I'm then going to come to my preferences and composition. There is a useful composition preference, H and J violations, and this will highlight in yellow everywhere that InDesign cannot honor the hyphenation and justification settings that I'm asking of it. Broadly, this equates to less than desirable spacing. So we want to diminish as much as possible the amount of yellow highlighting that we have in the column on the right hand side. I'm going to select it, Command or Control A, come to my paragraph formats. Just by turning hyphenation on, that helps. But we actually want to control the hyphenation. So I'm going to come to the Control Panel menu, down to hyphenation, and I have this slider, which is a good representation of the challenge that we face here. I've got it all the way over to the left. We can have better spacing or we can have fewer hyphens. We can't have both. We need to find a sweet spot there. Because hyphenation is useful, but I don't want too much of it, I'm going to increase this value to 7 letters. Only words with 7 letters or more are candidates for hyphenation. I would like 4 characters left behind before the hyphen, 3 characters taken down to the next line. The hyphen limit, I'm going to set that to 1. I don't want a ladder effect at the end of the line. Hyphenation zone, as intriguing as it sounds, is actually irrelevant. It's only relevant when working with left-aligned text using the single line paragraph composer. And neither of those things are true in this case. And I do not want to hyphenate the last word of a paragraph. Do I want to hyphenate capitalized words? Well, that will depend upon the text. I do not want to hyphenate across column. I am going to hyphenate capitalized words. And we now see that we've increased the amount of yellow highlighting, and that's because we are being stricter with the hyphenation than we were before. But when we do what we do next, which is to come to the justification settings, things should improve dramatically. And it's a combination of the hyphenation and justification that is getting us the desired effect. Okay, so for the word spacing, first of all, let me just point out that the desired column, this is the only column that is relevant when you're working with left, center, or right aligned text. But when working with justified, you specify the range between which it's permissible for the word spacing to vary. I am going to get stricter, and I'm going to say it can only get as big as 120% of a word space. But I'm going to call into action the letter spacing. I'll allow some variance of that, where currently there is none. So -2 for the minimum, +2 for the maximum. And then glyph scaling, which will make a big difference. This is the horizontal scaling of the characters. Now you may cast your mind back to the first chapter of this course where I said something like, don't change the horizontal scaling of the characters. And that's true, except when it comes to glyph scaling, because when you apply a minimal amount, as I am doing here, it's imperceptible, but the result that we get makes it very much worthwhile. All of these things are compromises, and when we see how little yellow highlighting we now have, that I feel is a compromise definitely worth making. And if you're in any doubt about this, you could take some type at your given size, which in this case is 16 points. And if you put it side by side at 100% width and 98% width and 102% width, and from a reading distance, see if you can tell the difference, I suspect that you won't be able to. But it gives us a much better result. So those are 3 of the 4 parts of the equation for getting good type color: hyphenation, custom hyphenation settings, making sure that you have an appropriate column measure, and then custom justification settings. The 4th part of the equation is optical margin alignment, and we'll look at that in the next movie.